Let me give you a demo. Let me give you a demo. This is what our company does. Let me give you a demo. That's not aligned with their stage in the buyer journey. They were just struggling to hit the Tesla quarterly numbers. And Elon was like, what's a sales funnel? They had to talk to salespeople to get the information they needed. And unfortunately, salespeople took advantage of that. The best salespeople never give the same demo.
If you're getting objections at the end, is that still...
Huge problem.
That's a
Huge problem if you are.
How does AI factor into that?
I mean, it's such a beautiful opportunity. The principles don't change. The way we execute on them does.
That's Mark Roberge. You might know him from his VC firm Stage 2 Capital, or as senior lecturer at Harvard Business School, or maybe you know him as the founding CRO of HubSpot, literally writing the book on scaling your sales and revenue. Today, we're going to ask him,
How do you build your first sales funnel?
We got to play with that word sales funnel a little bit. And before we get into it, I actually have a pretty funny story about it.
Yeah.
I've gotten to know this gentleman, John McNeil. John was introduced to Elon Musk through Sheryl Sandberg. Elon Musk was, it was years ago. They were just struggling to hit the Tesla quarterly numbers from a sales standpoint. And Sheryl thought John could help. And so Elon was like, talked to him for like half an hour and just had a really good feel. I was like, yeah, great. Can you do it? And John was like, well, I don't know. Let me like take some time to figure this out. And do you have any, data on your sales funnel? And Elon was like, what's a sales funnel? So the first sales funnel, I mean, just for conceptual definition here, some people call it sales process, sales methodology. Essentially what we're talking about is a way to take a prospect who has no idea you exist and take them through a process to get them as a signed customer ready to implement your product and see the success that you promise to the arena, okay? These things can be very complicated or simple. I'm going to lay out 4 basic steps that you often see in every sales funnel. The first one is prospecting, right? And this is just getting to a first meeting. Like that's very difficult and there's a whole bunch of different techniques there, et cetera. The second one is discovery and qualification. That's what happens in the first meeting. The third step is presentation/demo, right? So now we have to talk to them about what we do. And the fourth one is objection handling and closing. Okay, so like these can come in like, oh, if you're selling huge $1 million deals, you can see sales processes that are 12 to 15 steps. But this is just a really basic foundation. You cannot be a fast-growing company without AI sitting next to your sales funnel. Thankfully, the folks over at HubSpot put together a new resource on the sales funnel with AI. It covers everything you need, from voice cloning to cold email tools to quick video creation and even more. And we have that resource ready to go. It's in the link in the description. Just go download it now. Then I want to talk about, like, generally speaking, the mindset that you have to have that solves against the pothole that occurs. And what people think about is they think about those steps in terms of like interrupting the customer and pulling them along and persuading them and manipulating them. And that's an older version of sales. It's an older version of sales where the buyer didn't have as much empowerment. They had to talk to salespeople to get the information they needed. And unfortunately, salespeople took advantage of that. And that's why I think the field has a generally negative perception today. But this is the technique that even before the internet, before buyer empowerment, this is what worked really well, just from a basic behavioral psychology standpoint. And that is you have to reframe your mindset as supporting the buyer through the purchasing cycle, supporting them through their journey. We've talked about that in the past. Okay? So let's talk about, with each stage, how you might do that. Prospecting. Pothole number 1 is like, let me give you a demo. Let me give you a demo. This is what our company does. Let me give you a demo. That's not aligned with their stage in the buyer journey. 95% of the people we're prospecting to, they're at the problem identification stage. So the prospecting needs to be about educational content about the problem, not about the product. Okay? Now you're aligned with the buyer journey, okay? Step 2, the first meeting. Most people give a demonstration of what the product is. That's not where they're at. They have a loose definition of their problem, and you are an expert in this problem. You need to ask them and develop them like how that problem is going, what they think about that problem, educate them on the problem, reframe that problem so that they're ready to now look at solutions. Okay? You also have to do some qualification to figure out if you should even be spending some time with these folks. Third step, presentation and demo. Most people give just a generic demo. The best salespeople never give the same demo. It's completely tailored to the problem that person has. Now, you're not manipulating, you're not lying. Like, I can sell this microphone in 100 different ways, depending on what you need. Like, I'm selling this microphone to like a retailer. What are you trying to do as a retailer? Are you trying to bring foot traffic in which case you need something that people can try? Are you trying to maximize revenue per square footage? Are you trying to like stay in line with trends? Are you trying to like add a new category? Like, I can explain this microphone in 100 different ways, and I'm not lying. I'm just explaining it in a way that resonates with the problem, the specific problem that you're solving. So most people at that stage just give a generic pitch. You got to be really good at tailoring. And then objection handling and closing, it's kind of done by all the other steps. If you've done your qualification well, if you've hit in certain steps along the way, the close is very natural. It's just like, hey, Matthew, thank you so much for the time we've spent together. You've elaborated this problem to me. We've really connected on this problem. I think you've told me that you've learned through our process together what this problem is. You have to solve this problem by June. You're very clear on it. And you've admitted to me that like our solution is optimal for solving this problem. I think the only thing we're both stressed about is we should have gotten this started a month ago, given your timeline. So what do you think? Can we partner up? You know, so you've really checked all those boxes through the process, as opposed to like these like really cheesy closes. So hopefully that gives you an example of how people typically do it, and it's self-serving, and how you can do each stage that's more aligned with the buyer.
So in this final stage, when it comes to like objection handling, objection shouldn't be a surprise at this point, right? Like if you're aligning with the buyer journey this whole way through the funnel, if you're getting objections at the end, is that still...
Huge problem.
That's a
huge problem if you are. It just means that like you've skipped some steps somewhere. The best salespeople don't really get objections. They ask questions to pull all the objections out. They're not afraid of it. Like more amateur salespeople are trying to like don't ask him about that because that will raise up guess what? That objection is going to come up at some point. And the worst thing that will happen is if that objection comes up in a room where you're not there. You need to have it come up so you can address it with them. So if you're doing a great job, you've explicitly and proactively brought those things up through the process. Okay. Now, the last point I want to make to really codify this buyer-centric approach to the sales funnel and the sales process is how you define the gates between those steps, right? So like, going from setting the meeting to doing the first meeting to being in the presentation stage to being in the closing stage, right? Most people set those gates as seller actions. It's like, okay, I set the meeting. Okay, now we're in the meeting stage. I did the discovery call, so that puts us into the presentation stage. I gave them a presentation, so that puts us in the closing stage. Instead, you force the team to be more aligned with the buyer and supporting the buyer through the journey if you define those gates as buyer actions, not seller actions. And it's such a minor nuance. So, for example, at the prospecting stage, instead of I sent them the meeting invite, they accepted the meeting invite. Super simple and trivial, but aligns with the buyer action, okay? After we do the discovery call, instead of I gave them a discovery call, it's I sent them the findings of the discovery call in email, and they wrote back and said those are correct. At the presentation stage, instead of saying I gave them a demo, it's that I wrote them a summary of the final buying steps, and they wrote back and said those are accurate. Instead of, I sent them the contract. It's they sent back the red lines. Okay, so you can see it's like really simple, but you'd be shocked that if you, over time, run the close rates on when someone gave someone a demo and how often that closed, you're going to see a lot of volatility and inconsistency and unpredictability. Versus if you run it against a buyer action, like you summarized the buyer steps and they wrote back saying they agreed, the conversion to customer is far more accurate. So not only does this technique force your salespeople to be aligned with the buyer and where they're at and supporting them with their journey, it also creates a very predictable funnel for you.
Today, like, how does AI factor into that?
I mean, it's such a beautiful opportunity because we're entering a third era with this particular problem, where the first era was like the invention of sales tech in like the 70s and 80s and 90s. It was the on-prem software. And the whole problem was like, I cannot get anyone to adopt the technology. Like the adoption of CRM, the input of data was like 5 or 10%. Then you moved into the next era when cloud came about, and this is when HubSpot really helped drive this. More teams were inside. They were dependent on the CRM to figure out what to do. And even the folks that are outside, you've got mobile phones. It's just so much easier for the rep to get the data in. So you had a lot more data and you could play with this stuff, but you're still dependent on human input. The AI era is the third era where we no longer have dependency on human input. And this is out there today. It's like even today, like even before this AI explosion in the last couple years, the information to tell you where you were with a prospect in the sales funnel, the information to tell you where you were in a quarter to hit a quarterly revenue target, the best information to figure that out was not input by sellers. It was in sales call transcripts that were being logged. It was in marketing campaign results. It was in product usage logs if you're doing like a PLG motion. Like we have so much data out there that we are no longer dependent on input. And that's really what AI is able to do, is it's able to shift the like pick your stat that like 60% of a seller's week is actually spent selling. AI has the potential to make it 100%. Don't worry about the CRM. Like you shouldn't even have to log into the CRM. Just go do your job. Set meetings, run discovery calls, do demos. We'll take care of the rest and figure that out. So it's just a beautiful era that we're going into to map to these same principles. The principles don't change. The way we execute on them does. So hopefully that gives you some insight on how to build your first sales funnel. This really is a process about how to take a prospect that has no idea about your business, but it's a great fit, and turn them into a signed customer ready to go, right? So 3 takeaways. Number 1, there's just a basic foundation to the steps of the sales funnel. Step 1, prospecting. How do you get a first appointment? Step 2, how do you run the first meeting? This discovery. Step 3, how do you give a demo or presentation? We call it the presentation stage. Step 4, how do you handle objections and close out? Good. Number 2, the underlying pothole with each of those is to not align the step with the buyer journey. You have to reframe the goal and the mindset of each step to be aligned with where the buyer is in their journey. We talked about a bunch of examples from like not pushing the demo at the prospecting stage, but think about education. Right? Not just jumping into a demo in the first meeting, but help them define their problem. Number 3, a great way to tactically make sure your sellers are continuously aligned with where the buyer is in their journey is to define the gates between each of those stages, not as seller actions, but as buyer actions. That codifies the process of making sure the seller keeps the buyer's needs top of mind through the entire process. My name's Mark. I hope you found this information on the sales funnel interesting and valuable. And give me feedback. I love feedback. I love questions. I learn from it. Drop them in the comments. I'll read them. I'll respond to them. I'll adjust the content going forward. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll have a whole lot more content just like this. Just download it now.
Get it for free now.
Get it for free now.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Beautiful.